Okay, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thanks for joining us today. See, I come in automatic respect, you can tell already. Good morning. This is the February 20th Santa Barbara County Association Government Board meeting. For the record, my name is Randy Rouse. I'm the chair of the SBCAG board. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair Rouse. For roll call, Directors Lee?
Here.
Capps?
Here.
Hartman? Capps is here? Okay. Thank you. Hartman? Nelson? Here. Levanino? Here. Perotti?
Present here.
Clark?
Here.
Mosby?
Here.
Julian?
Here.
Patino?
Here.
Brown?
Here.
Silva?
Here.
And Chair Rouse.
Here. All right, very good. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? And begin. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All righty. Madam Clerk, is any public comment, any item that was provided in advance for this item? Wait, yeah. For item 3, I should say.
Oh, there was a written public comment that was sent to the board yesterday.
Okay.
And it also applies to consent items 4G, 4I, and discussion item 5B.
All right, very good. And then item 4 will be approval of consent calendar. Are there any directors that need to pull any item from the consent for discussion? Are there any public comments for any items on the consent calendar?
Only the written public comment that was received yesterday.
All right, thank you very much. Any board discussion on any of that, including the item submitted? Okay, with that, I'll ask for a motion for the consent calendar, please.
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Move Patino.
Second.
Second by Brown. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Lee?
Aye.
Capps?
Aye.
Hartman? Nelson?
Aye.
Levanino? Aye. Perotti?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
Mosby?
Aye.
Julian?
Aye.
Patino?
Aye.
Brown?
Aye.
Silva?
Aye.
And Chair Rouse.
Aye.
Motion passes 12-0.
Okay, thank you very much. I've had a request from Director Patino to move 5B ahead of 5A, and if there's no objections by the board, I'd like to go ahead and do that. And so would you please read, Madam Clerk, would you read 5B into the record?
Thank you. 5B, Draft 2025 State and Federal Legislative Platform. 5B1, receive a report from SBCAG's federal lobbyist Don Gilchrist of Thomas Walters and Associates. 5B2, receive a report from SBCAG state lobbyist Gus Corey of Corey Consulting. And 5B3, approve SBCAG's federal, state, and legislative platforms for 2025.
Yeah. All righty, and Ms. Bianchi-Clement?
Yeah, good morning. For the record, my name is Lauren Bianchi-Clement. I serve as the Government Affairs and Public Information Manager for SBCAG. It is my pleasure to present the state and federal legislative platforms before you today. SBCAG's legislative program is one of the key tools our agencies use to secure funding and advance public policy issues and interests for high priority projects, regional projects, programs, and operations funded by Measure A. The annually updated platforms provide a unified regional voice to state and federal policymakers, emphasizing transportation and housing initiatives shaped by input from our advisory committees, our transit partners, our legislative advocates, and regional associations such as the California Association of Council of Governments, among others. I want to take a moment to acknowledge our agency's management team and their dedication in shaping our legislative platforms. Each fall, our team comes together to identify priorities and focus areas that serve as a guiding framework for the year ahead. In total, our collaborative approach strengthens our priorities and helps us all of us achieve our mutually shared goals. Today, you will hear a presentation first from our federal lobbyist, Don Gilchrist of Thomas Walters and Associates, and then from our state lobbyist, Gus Corey of Corey Consulting. Both presentations will provide their respective legislative outlooks for 2025 as it pertains to our priorities. You are also being asked to consider approval of the legislative platform. This will help guide our advocacy efforts in Sacramento and in Washington, D.C. Logistically, each of the draft platforms are attached to your staff report. The version and track changes shows adjustments from the previous year, and a clean copy is also included for your consideration. We organize the platforms to showcase a high priority issue area with corresponding goals and strategies to provide us the flexibility to tackle those issues. These platforms were shared with our local transit partners during a coordination meeting in January, where Santa Barbara MTD requested support for creating a medium-sized transit intensive cities program, which has been included in the federal platform. This aligns with previous SBCAG board efforts in 2020 to address funding losses prior to the Santa Barbara's population reclassification as a large urbanized area. Jerry Estrada, General Manager of Santa Barbara MTD, and or Hillary Blackerby, depending on the timing, Planning and Marketing Manager, are available via Zoom and remote testimony in Santa Barbara, respectively, for any questions on this request after our presentations. No other feedback or requests for additions have been made to the platforms that you are seeing today. So with that, I would like to invite Don Gilchrist to the podium to talk about our federal legislative outlook, and I'm happy to help facilitate questions that you have after each of the presentations.
Thank you, Mr. Gilchrist.
Well, thank you, Chair Rouse, members of the board. Good to see you again. Don Gilchrist with Thomas Walters and Associates, and appreciate the chance to talk to you again about your federal platform. Lauren's going to help me out with a couple slides just to talk about where we're at so far in 2025. It's been a busy year, and the next couple of months are going to continue to be extremely busy. I'm sure you all are aware, starting on Inauguration Day, President Trump moved forward very aggressively with a lot of executive actions. Advance to the next slide, please. A lot of administrative actions to try to implement as much of his federal agenda as possible. The potential impact on SBCAG, man, this is getting kind of rough here. Sorry. No, I'm going to try a cough drop. I apologize. Thank you. So the biggest potential impact on SBCAG is in the area of transportation programs, and for sure this is going to slow down some of the infrastructure for electric vehicles that comes out of the Department of Transportation, and we're very curious if it's going to impact any of the other funding in the area of the Green New Deal. That's the language from the executive order. It's not very well defined, so we're not sure exactly what the impacts will be. At the same time, in Congress, congressional Republicans are moving forward with budget reconciliation. And this is this is quite possibly going to impact some of the other programs from President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act in the area of climate change mitigation and renewable energy. They may be trying to repeal some of those programs in order to provide offsets for the new spending that they're trying to do. And at the same time, we're looking at hopefully some action on appropriations to finish up the FY25 bills and get started on the next year. This is 5 months behind schedule. We need to enact these bills by March 14th, when the current continuing resolution will expire. And I should clarify that the appropriations process is completely separate from budget reconciliation. There are two different bills, two different processes. One of the things we're working on in the appropriations bills are funding for two of your projects that were sponsored by your local delegation. Representative Carbajal was able to insert $250,000 into the transportation bill for the Santa Barbara East Side Active and Safety transportation improvements, and Senator Padilla was able to insert $1.5 million into the Senate bill for the Cabrillo project. We need to finish up the bills in order for those projects to become reality. And we're hoping to see that happen. Time is actually kind of running out on appropriations, and it's quite possible that we'll end up with some sort of a long-term continuing resolution instead of the actual bills. We should know a little bit more next week about how that's going to play out. If we advance to the next slide, this will just summarize for you where we're at with appropriations. In the FY25 House column, you'll see that House Republicans were seeking to reduce spending in several transportation grant programs when it's relative to the previous years or the numbers that were proposed by the Senate. This does not affect your transportation formula funding, which is where you get the bulk of your money. Transit programs and the highway formulas would not be reduced, but the House Republicans were seeking to reduce funding for several multimodal, transit, and rail grant programs. If we advance to the next slide, we're also going to be working on surface transportation reauthorization this year. The surface transportation bill does not expire until 2026, but we have to start this year to get our priorities on the table for consideration as Congress starts to look at drafting this bill. These are some of the priorities that we're going to continue to be working on. The formula programs are so important to you. We want to see more money put into metropolitan planning. Active transportation is going to continue to be important. And also, we're hoping to see an opportunity for member projects. That's quite possible. The project earmarking process and appropriations bills has been reasonably successful. So I think in the surface transportation bill, we may see similar opportunities for transportation projects. Underlying it all is a pretty significant challenge to finance the legislation because the Highway Trust Fund is experiencing a shortfall when you compare the revenues that are going into it compared to the spending that we would like to see just to continue or increase these programs. So that will be playing out throughout this year and next. We are recommending that SBCAG board members and staff, again, go to Washington, D.C., and we're thinking around May would be a good time to engage on these issues and some of the other ones that will be in play. I can pause there for questions, or I can walk you through your platform. If we could advance maybe to the platform slide, I can come back to questions. But just specifically in your platform, issue 1 is federal funding for SBCAG's priority projects, and this will remain very similar in that we're seeking federal funds through any federal opportunities for your projects. And these could be grant opportunities or earmarking opportunities in the legislation in Congress. Issue 2 is regional partnerships. We're proposing to continue working with partners in Santa Barbara County on shared issues. This includes Vandenberg, Santa Barbara MTD, and the countywide broadband strategic plan. Issue 3 is augment transportation funding sources, and that's carrying over from last year, and that's focused on supporting long-term solvency for the Highway Trust Fund. Issue 4 is flexible funding sources. This is updated a little bit to take into account that we're moving into the next reauthorization process cycle. The goals of supporting federal transportation formulas and active transportation, metropolitan planning, these goals all remain the same. We're just updating the status of the legislation there and the opportunities. Under issue 5, passenger rail continues to support funding for improving these opportunities in the Central Coast. We want to protect the existing resources that were enacted in the bipartisan infrastructure law, and we also want to start looking ahead to the next reauthorization for those. Issue 6 is mobility and transportation network resiliency. This is updated a little bit to reflect the new challenges and opportunities that we're seeing this year. The next reauthorization bill is going to probably emphasize the importance of transportation infrastructure for economic growth a little bit more than some of the Biden priorities. We're going to be emphasizing reliability and efficiency as priorities that can help bring benefits to the Santa Barbara County region. And issue 7 is innovative financing options. These are those credit assistance programs that can help lower the costs. You experienced this firsthand with the TIFIA loan for the 101 project, and the platform just continues to support these types of programs. With that, I'll pause and see if I can respond to any questions you may have.
Are there questions for Mr. Gilchrist? You guys have your light on, or? Nope.
I'll ask a question, actually. Yeah, Chair.
Oh,
Thank you.
go right ahead.
The member projects that have been advocated for that were currently in existing earmarks, how are those selected? Does SBCAG play a role in that? Some direction from us, or are these just regional projects that happen to touch transportation?
Specifically related to the projects that SBCAG requested?
Well, the ones that you mentioned 2 projects in
Yes.
there, right? Were those SBCAG requests?
Those were SBCAG requests that were made by board members and staff when they came to DC last February, and they were very well received. At that time, we were still waiting for, and this is typical of the process, is you have to sort of wait to see what the appropriations committees are going to say about their guidance and what they will be allowing to. So we want to have some options. And then as we talk to our delegation, talk to Congress, we sort of sift which ones are going to work and which ones aren't going to work. We used that approach last year, and I would recommend something similar.
So I guess the next question would be then, in the past, how would we prioritize those? Are we prioritizing those regionally? Or are we, what does that look like? How successful have we been in the past?
In the past, the 101 has clearly been the regional priority.
Right.
And Representative Carbajal was very effective in getting us a $7 million earmark, which doesn't sound like a lot compared to the amount of money that we're looking for, but in terms of earmarks, that's a big one.
Yeah.
And he was very effective in that. And so frankly, this time around, we decided to try a different project because that's the nature of the beast. It increases your opportunity. You don't really want to come back asking for the same project over and over again. It's basically, does that help?
I can chime in too, but we also look for readiness of projects, so we kind of develop a list of what is ready. So our regional priority project 101, getting that done. But as you know, with federal earmarks or congressional directed spending, there is a certain time period by which those monies need to be spent, and it's very prescriptive on what it could be spent on. So we look at those parameters and those boundaries, and we kind of assess based upon a list of readiness for projects throughout the region. I think we're really excited about the reauthorization package and the opportunities that that is going to provide us for maybe some larger larger pots of funding. And so we are working as a team. We had talked about as a team this fall is to come up with a process by which to vet some of that for the reauthorization projects for the reauthorization package, which is different than the annual congressionally directed spending project.
So does staff make those decisions on what those priorities are?
In concert with Public Works, your Public Works staff and a regional collaboration.
And the member.
Board.
And the member.
Board member.
The member's office provides direction on what is feasible and what they would like to see. So it's really the member who's directing where he would like to, what projects he would like to advocate for. So it's really a give and take between the local jurisdictions and putting our best foot forward of what we think we can accomplish.
Great. Well, I'd like to see what our list was last time and then what our list is this time around. It'd be good to report back to the board just so we can see, get behind the curtain a little bit on how that decision making is made. I think that would help all of us understand that and the prioritization that goes into that. Thank you.
Are there any questions from Santa Barbara?
And then at this time, I would say that Santa Barbara MTD is on the, is available to answer any questions about that addition if need be. And that's specific only to the federal platform.
Director Mosby.
Just question as things are progressing and things have modified, some of these are, and to piggyback on Director Nelson's statement is, a lot of things have changed and modified fast. One is like, your regional partnership goal number 2. I mean, things have, every 6 months, things are happening fast with respect to the last mile internet capabilities and stuff. And we all know what Starlink is doing now. And in a lot of ways, just as we had old copper wires going to everybody's house, I mean, some of these things, and I think bringing these back for alignment with some of the things that are progressing fast and into the future would be pertinent.
Yeah.
This is kind of why I made the comment about how great we have a management team to review this, because Fred Luna, who works on our broadband program, was able to kind of add some additions to our platform to allow for that flexibility, and including Starlink or other opportunities, so that we are ready to be able to be adaptive to where the opportunities are that benefit this region and the priorities of your board.
All right, very good. Thank you. So if there are no further questions for Mr. Gilchrist, we'll move on to, Mr. Corey. Then right after that, we'll entertain public comment.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Directors. Gus Corey, State Legislative Advocate. It's a pleasure to be here. Congratulations on the chairmanship. Look forward to working with you. Enjoyed very much working with you with the Coast Rail Coordinating Council. Director Mosby, it's great to have you back on the board again. So lots going on in Sacramento, as opposed to what's going on in Washington, D.C. We're fairly optimistic here about some of the opportunities that we have in 2025. So I've also got a very short PowerPoint presentation, and then I'll briefly go over your state legislative platform. So next slide, please. So just looking back at some of our 2024 accomplishments, the REAP program, this is the Regional Early Action Planning grants that we get in order to help develop affordable housing. There was a state budget deficit, as you know, last year. It was over $70 million. The state was trying to cut the program in half. It's a $600 million program, $300 million the state was trying to recoup back. And I have to say that it is truly a team effort here at SBCAG. SBCAG was the first one out of the gate. Before CalCog or any other organization, we worked with our local jurisdictions to articulate how damaging this would be, because we had projects in the queue already, agreements with developers and such. And so that argument had resonated with the Pro Tem's office and the Senate. And so they were able to restore $260 million of the $300 million, which was great. And it protected $5.3 million in revenue here in the county. The active transportation program, we've done exceedingly well. We had about $80 million worth of projects countywide that we protected. The state, again, was trying to cut that program by $400 million. It has not typically received a general fund augmentation, but that has been the case over the last 2 cycles. And so working with Director Kern, Mr. Kotchak, among others, we were intimately involved in negotiations with the California Transportation Commission. We were able to tell them to keep the project, Cycle 6 projects whole, because those were vetted and awarded, and then just take it out of the Cycle 7 projects if need be. Defense. The challenge that we have at the state level is keeping the window open on our opportunities to finish the 101 in particular. Because of the governor's climate action plan for transportation infrastructure, also known as CAPTI, there's a heavy emphasis on delivering multimodal options, which we have done exceedingly well. But these bills here, AB 6 and AB 7, would have really hamstrung our ability to continue to access competitive grants to leverage our Measure A dollars against. AB 1335, this was a bill that when you're doing your RENA assessments, it would have required you to take inventory of the entire population in the county and house everybody in the county, which just was, pretty ambitious. And so we were able to defeat that bill. In AB 2535, this was the Senate Bill 1 program, the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program. It's the largest pot of funding in Senate Bill 1 that we need to access, because the final the golden spike, I guess we'll call it, is we need about $137 million to polish off the 101. And that's going to take funding from more than one source of funding. There's the Solutions for Congested Corridors program, there's a Trade Corridor Enhancement program, and there's a local partnership program that we have successfully accessed in the past. And we're hoping by this June that we'll get the thumbs up from the commission. So fingers crossed there. And that's been a partnership with Caltrans. They've been working hand in glove with us on that endeavor. So punching above our weight, I thought the board might appreciate this. Just to give some kind of context, when we started with our lane in a train narrative, we've secured over $600 million from the state for US 101, which is 4 times the return on investment of what we have dedicated in Measure A, and it could be much more given the upcoming award that we're hoping for. And $400 million in rail awards, we had advocated through, Director Kern, when we were originally talking about the cap and trade program, to put more resources into passenger rail to make cap and trade. It wasn't just about high-speed rail. And Senator Jackson at the time said, well, why do I care about high-speed rail? It doesn't touch my district. We said, you're right, but what about if we had connectivity that made it all make sense? And so we advocated for a larger pie that went to passenger rail, and we've been a beneficiary. So it's over $1 billion. These are conservative numbers. Mr. Kochik would probably have the exact number. On the highway side, I think it's closer to $630 million, but I just wanted to be conservative there. So next slide, please. So just very quickly, opportunities and challenges for the year. There's a so-called surplus of $363 million. It's not really a surplus. This is just unencumbered money that's in the rainy day fund that the legislature can appropriate for any purpose. They did take corrective action last June to do the budget forecasting the deficit for 25-26, which was then forecasted at $30 billion. So the good news is there really isn't a deficit. We'll see what the May revise suggests, but the market has rebounded, so we're hoping for some kind of a modest surplus. Disaster response spending, obviously from the fires in Los Angeles. The governor and the legislature acted swiftly. They dispersed $2.5 billion for the fires in Los Angeles. That, however, has caused a stir, just so folks know, in both houses about we've been victims of natural disasters too, flooding in Montecito, fires, we're no strangers to that. So I think legislators are trying to work intently to see if there is a recovery package that they would consider for future events. In transportation, the cap and trade program. So the cap and trade program was originally the source of funding for the high-speed rail program. We added a bunch of other stuff where transit operations is supplemented through cap and trade, passenger rail services supplemented through cap and trade. And now with what's going on in Washington, D.C., we think that there's a real opportunity here to make the Central Coast maybe more of a focal point because the president's come out and said that high-speed rail stops in Bakersfield, for now, like who the heck wants to take that? And so we think that there's a way to marry the objectives of still making investments in the valley, having it make sense by connecting to the Central Coast, and it could be more cost-effective, and you could accelerate delivery of really connecting the Bay Area to Los Angeles and helping out ridership here in the county and giving people an option. Gas tax successor source, just very briefly on that. The gas tax is just not keeping up, with inflation. A lot of that has to do too with just supplies, materials, equipment are expensive. So we need to convert to something. There's a road user task force that's been going on for 10 years. They haven't really done much there, and so we think that there's maybe some other options that the legislature may want to consider. So we're going to keep an eye on how that narrative goes, that conversation goes. And then, as Mr. Gilchrist mentioned, just the impact of the federal executive orders, and if the feds try to claw back any money that has not been obligated already, I think we're trying to keep an eye on that. Next slide, please. So your platform, and I won't go through, you can look in your packet. I'm happy to answer any questions, but it just to prevent eye strain here. So protecting and acquiring state funding, as I mentioned, we're going after the Senate Bill 1 funds to finish off the 101. We've been aggressive with also trying to look for opportunities for broadband, funding when that exists. We actually carried legislation, we sponsored legislation that Senator Lamone carried to make us a direct recipient a couple years back for first and last mile broadband service funding. And so I know that that's been a big focus for the county. The active transportation program, while there's no money, there's another issue that's arising, and that's there's no funding for maintenance. So unlike the highway side or even on transit, there's funding for maintenance. That's not the case with active transportation. And then there's a disconnect with Caltrans also about when you want to do complete streets and you're going over the right of way, it's just kind of having a meeting of the minds over who foots the bill and how do you kind of complete the network. Regional partnerships, that's just working with the Central Coast Coalition, which is Santa Cruz down to Santa Barbara, especially on the governor's climate action plan to make sure that we still qualify. We don't have the same air quality concerns as, say, the San Joaquin Valley, yet we're delivering multimodal projects in spades, active transportation, as we've talked about. So just continue to work on that. Tweaks to transit. So transit is heavily dependent upon the sales tax on diesel. Diesel has been a declining revenue source that's exacerbating the issue to keep service up and running. The legislature did provide a one-time funding through Senate Bill 125. It was $5.1 billion statewide. We got our share was $53 million, which this board had distributed last year. And so, but we need a more predictable long-term solution to kind of keep the buses moving, to keep the trains running, to even get more service out there because there's such demand for service. And so expanding coast passenger rail service, that's what I was mentioning before about there's really no service between Gilroy and San Luis Obispo. And so it's connecting that gap and making it a more viable alternative for folks. Addressing climate change is just about cap and trade. Virtual meetings, this is a lingering thing after the pandemic. You've got citizens advisory committees, exec committee, where it's hard for folks to be able to congregate. And so maybe having them instead of the SBCAG board, meet virtually at least. Those are non-binding, committees, if you will, but it would allow for more public participation, more frequency of meetings to kind of hash out issues. And so there will be legislation on this, and it's a carryover from our previous platforms. And then playing with House money, this goes back to the REAP program. It's just frustrating where we're having to front the money in order to come up with all these plans, and the state has lagged in reimbursing us. And so we need to make sure that, especially with us being a smaller county, that we have the resources to properly do the work in an expeditious fashion so that we're meeting local, regional, and state demands for the whole jobs, housing, transportation nexus. So I didn't want you to have to go through all that, but that's what yeah. So that concludes my presentation, and I think the trap door is going to open if I go on much longer by Ms. Clemens. So,
Okay. All right, very good. Questions for Mr. Corey. Mr. Director Legamino.
Thank you very much. Gus, just on what I'm mostly concerned about is the last 137 million. So timeline on that, I know there's a decision May or June?
June.
Okay, June. So what's the timeline between now and June? I mean, are they racking and stacking, or what kind of feedback are you getting at this point?
So the submissions were late last year, I think end of November is when it's all blurred to me, actually. The staff recommendations come out the first week of June, and then the commission will meet a couple weeks later and decide. And, not to jinx it, but once you're in the staff recommendations, there's a 99.9% chance that you're going to get funding. And so they're reviewing all the applications. I think the commission, we've inserted language successfully into the guidelines about completing corridors, funding projects in a county with less than 500,000 residents, because the 101 doesn't just have utility for Santa Barbara residents. It truly is only one of two north-south arterials. And we've seen what happens anytime the Grapevine shuts down, and folks are having to reroute, through our area. And so that's not lost upon Caltrans. And like I said, headquarters is a co-sponsor also, so fingers crossed.
So what's the fear factor ratio of the feds clawing back that SB1 money? I mean, that's nothing's going to happen on that? Okay.
That's all state money.
Okay, so it's already allocated, it's already ready to roll.
Yeah, that's contingent upon, the SB1 funds are predominantly vehicle registration fee funds that are collected here. So we're firewalled from anything that happens with the feds on that program.
Okay.
Very good. Further questions? Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Corey, you'd mentioned the gas tax alternatives, for lack of a better word. obviously, the electrical vehicles aren't paying a gas tax. So we're seeing a decrease in revenues. So the model is broken, if you will, on a per-user basis.
Yes.
Is there going to be something like, what is the next model, if you have a clue? I mean, every one of these, all our electric vehicles have GPS. I know exactly how many miles they drive.
Correct.
I know, as far as, or do you put it all on a license fee for the vehicle? I don't know, but that too may not be fair because not everybody takes their vehicle out.
Right. So it's a great question.
What is that next model?
Yes. So I'll tell you, currently, the California Transportation Commission, through this road user task force, has really been looking at a vehicle miles traveled charge, which has not been popular for several reasons. And you'll get this even from progressive Democrats, believe it or not, that say that they don't want additional tracking, even though we're already being tracked on these things, or there's GPS in your vehicle. By having another transponder that's put in your vehicle that's monitoring you when you're driving to a Whole Foods or whatever else is not really very appealing to members of the legislature. But it is construed as a true road user charge. But it doesn't acknowledge that for the Central Coast in particular, so in the 5 counties, we have 1.5 million people. So that's not very many when you think about it. And yet we're having to drive further to go to places of employment, to schools and such, and plus 40% of our economy is dependent upon tourism. So you don't want to deter people from having to come here because we don't have frequent passenger rail service and such. And so it hasn't been popular, but it's still something that they're working on. There's a pilot program going on right now where they're trying to assess about 2.5 cents a mile to kind of get a feel about how to implement this thing. Alternatively, and there's a vehicle registration fee. So this is different from the vehicle license fee. The vehicle license fee is a 2% assessment on the value of your vehicle, and transportation doesn't get the benefit of that. It goes as an ERAF backfill. And so the vehicle registration fee, however, is a flat tiered fee. And we could do a broader presentation maybe at a later date for you, but it's already in law. So we had this in Senate Bill 1, where vehicles less than $5,000 paid $25. Vehicles less than $25,000 paid, I think it was $50, and so on. And the cap was $175. And so if you fast forward to today, 77% of all vehicles are worth less than $25,000. There is a way to get rid of the gas tax, get rid of even the EV fee, and convert it over and have at least those 77% of all registered vehicle owners save money by converting over. We've done the math on that. We're happy to come back and talk. And the beauty of the vehicle registration fee is you pay less annually because cars depreciate. So plus you get to write off a portion of it. There's not as many privacy concerns because the DMV's doing the valuation. You also don't have to reinvent a collection method because it's already something that's being collected. So it's quicker to implement, which is what we need. We have to stop the bleeding at some point because that's less state money that you're able to leverage against your Measure A dollars to address local streets and roads, address, for Caltrans to address the state highway system for safety and, repaving the system and such. So yeah, that's an alternative that me and my colleague, Mitch Weiss, who's the former executive director for the California Transportation Commission, are taking a look at, and we're talking to Director Kern and staff, among others, and then we'll come back to you at an appropriate time to discuss further and see what your direction is. And I think, for me, it's really important to get your feedback because our constituents are not going to go to a labor organization or a chamber of commerce. They're going to go to their local elected officials who they know better than their state or federal representatives. And so it's got to make sense for you. And so we'll continue the conversation and we'll come back at a later time. Thank you. Of course.
Are there any questions from Santa Barbara?
No, we're good. Thank
Santa
you.
Barbara, any questions?
We're good. Thanks for asking.
Thanks.
Okay, Director Nelson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. You're looking for feedback. The prioritization for my constituents is maintenance, number one. Number two is capital projects. So just, if you're asking for feedback,
I appreciate
those are my constituents. You know, a lot of these other prioritizations are much further down the list. You know, a rail, I'm sure that would poll at under 5% in my district right now. So, you know, and a lot of our districts. I know that there's some of the others that this is bigger and it's maybe sexier on this, you know, statewide. But a lot of us are just trying to do the basics here still.
Right.
And I think we need to get the basics done appropriately before we start to do some of these things that are a little bit more far-fetched and are aspirational, granted, but we got to get the basics done first. And so again, maintenance, capital, circulation projects are still the highest priority in at least my district. So there's feedback.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, very good. Well, thank you, Mr. Corey. And before we go on to the third part of the item on the approval, did you have more to present? Okay, I'm going to ask if there are public commenters on this item. I know it's a little strange order, but.
Chair, we have no request for public comment in Santa Maria. Santa Barbara, any public comment down there?
None.
No.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Then we'll go ahead and move on to item 3. Sorry?
Chair Rouse,
Oh,
I'll make adopt staff recommendation. I'll make a motion.
right. First by Nelson, second by Lagabino. Okay.
Oh.
Yes, please.
Director Lee.
Aye.
Caps.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
Lavanino.
Aye.
Mosby.
Aye.
Brown.
Aye.
Julian.
Aye.
Silva.
Aye.
Patino.
Aye.
Parodi.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
And Chair Rouse.
Aye.
Motion passes 12-0.
Okay, very good. And thanks for the board's indulgence for moving that around. We'll go to item 5A now. If you read that in the record, please.
Item 5A, Regional Broadband Program Environmental Impact Report for Last Mile Connections. 5A1, make the required California Environmental Equality Act findings for the Santa Barbara County Last Mile Broadband Program and adopt Resolution 2506 to certify the final programmatic environmental impact report. State Clearinghouse number 202-405-1301, dated February 13th, 2025, for the Santa Barbara County Last Mile Broadband Program, and direct staff to file a notice of termination with the State Office of Planning and Research and the County of Santa Barbara Clerk.
All right, Mr. Luna.
Yeah, that was a mouthful. Yeah, but all important stuff, though. Good morning, Chair Rouse and directors. Fred Luna here, Project Delivery Director, and as the clerk indicated, we're here to talk about regional broadband, and specifically, the focus of today's presentation is to discuss and present to the board a final environmental impact report on a programmatic environmental document for regional broadband that would cover last mile connections. So essentially, connections that come from main trunk lines that are being built by the state to residences, businesses, those end users that would benefit from it. Those types of projects and being implemented on a future basis. Our hope with this document is that it would be a resource for people that would be implementers of last mile installations. That could be SBCAG, that could be other local agencies or internet service providers in the county. And so it has been set up to build off of. And today I have our consultant, David Crook, he's the project manager for ESA. They were retained by SBCAG. We have been operating and funding this effort under our local agency technical assistance grant. That was a grant that SBCAG and the County of Santa Barbara, our partners, received for $1 million to fund this work effort and 2 other work tasks that are identified in the grant. And I'll briefly cover progress on those 2 other items as well today. But before I go to the next slide, just want to reach to this point, our partners at the county for helping us get to this point, and then Director Kern for her leadership on this and to get us to this point to date. Ms. Bianchi Clement, who helped us with our public notification process as well. So we were under the gun for about 12 months. It was a very expedited process because to meet the grant deadlines, but we're near the horizon here. So So for today, we have 3 work tasks, like I mentioned, under the local agency technical assistance grant. In addition to the programmatic EIR, there was 1 work task called establishment of a joint powers authority for regional broadband. That effort was concluded last summer. By your board in modifying their joint powers agreement. That was approved, and so SBCAG has been established as that joint powers authority for regional broadband in Santa Barbara County. And so we're positioned to implement projects and continue these types of work efforts going forward. Secondly, a second work task was design engineering. As part of your consent calendar today, there was an item to amend an MOU we have with Golden State Connect Authority to continue that effort. It's been ongoing. We've completed 2 phases to date for priority locations for last mile installations in the county. And then the 3rd phase that was on the agenda today and that was approved will expand that scope a little bit to what we're calling community anchor institutions. They're facilities that are like healthcare centers, libraries, schools in your area. It was an encompassing list. Our hopes there is to do the design at a concept level initially, and then we can prioritize working with your local communities as to which areas really make sense to take to the next level, because there were a number of locations listed on that. So at this point in time, I'll bring up our consultant, David Crook. He's going to walk you through what the project has done for the final programmatic EIR. And since November, when the draft was released, we have received 3 public comments on that.
Great. Thank you, Fred. I'm going to try to speak in the mic here so everyone can see me. So I'm standing a little awkwardly, forgive me. Just a little project background here. As Fred mentioned, SBCAG, in coordination with the county and other member agencies of the Broadband Alliance, prepared the Broadband Strategic Plan to serve as a guide for expanding broadband internet service to unserved and underserved communities countywide. The proposed project would implement this network expansion referred to as the Santa Barbara County Last Mile Broadband Program. SBCAG is the lead agency for the program EIR, which was funded through that LOTTA grant that Fred mentioned. The program EIR evaluates impacts associated with the construction and operation of these new last mile broadband facilities, which would provide service connections to the end users that Fred mentioned. And it should be noted that the broadband connections would be connected to the state middle mile network, which is a separate project. Once those installations have been completed, they would serve to connect to this to these proposed last mile connections. So just want to clarify that. As far as the location, as I mentioned before, the program covers the entire county, but the focus is on unserved and underserved communities that don't currently have broadband service that meets certain criteria. So as part of the initial broadband, the initial report, the strategic plan, identified 9 priority area locations that are identified on this map. They actually include 17 smaller community components, but we grouped them into 9 areas for more the ease of analysis in the EIR. 4 of those near-term areas, including Guadalupe, Casmalia, Los Alamos, and Cuyama, New Cuyama, have been through the design process, so those would be implemented in the shorter term here, with 5 additional projects among those 9 that are undergoing the design now, but should be completed in the next wave, if you will. And then additional future project locations would be determined based on need and funding. As far as the actual physical changes that would be involved, the project involves installation of new fiber optic cable and conduit to be installed underground adjacent to public or private right-of-ways, or roadways rather. So trying to avoid any new disturbance or having to cut through roads or trenching, things like that. There may be limited installation under roadways when there's not enough space along the side to avoid that surface disturbance. But they would typically be installed within previously disturbed or developed areas, such as adjacent to roadways, driveways, or like ornamental landscaped areas that don't contain habitat and things like that. And also trying to avoid drainages and creeks, things like that. So these conduits would be attached to bridges wherever possible, so they don't have to get permits for those. And then, although they're not anticipated, based on the feedback we've gotten from Golden State Connect Authority, there could be installations along existing utility lines or poles that are out there if it's some resources, other sensitivities in that area. And it's possible that some new poles could be installed if needed, but those would be fairly rare. Regarding the CEQA process, when we were here back in November, we were releasing the program EIR. The EIR is a first-tier CEQA document, meaning it's the foundation for future analysis with some site-specific review for those future projects that haven't been defined yet. The EIR would be used, as Fred mentioned, by lead agencies, which could include SBCAG, also the county or the incorporated cities, and as well as internet service providers like Golden State Connect Authority, who might be proposing projects that would rely on this EIR for some of the environmental clearance. And again, as far as the draft EIR that was released in November, it was a county-wide program-level assessment, meaning it covers those high-level cumulative impacts of an ongoing program installing broadband throughout the county. However, we did include that project-level detail for those 9 priority areas, which is intended to streamline the implementation of those projects. So those should be fully cleared under CEQA in terms of the impacts and the mitigation measures that are required to implement those. So those mitigation measures, as I'll get to in a minute, will become conditions of approval for the respective lead agencies when they issue permits to build those. Again, this includes mitigation measures to address both those program level future projects and as well as these project level impacts for the 9 priority projects. And it also, the EIR included a reasonable range of alternatives that would attain the basic project objectives. Regarding the scope of the EIR, you can see kind of this represents all the 20 topics that are in the CEQA Appendix, California Environmental Quality Act, Appendix G checklist. Of these 8 topics that are in bold here were carried forward to the draft EIR for full detailed analysis as part of the draft EIR, which was circulated for public review back in November. The EIR found that all the impacts were either less than significant or less than significant with implementation of applicable mitigation measures. They addressed the near-term impacts, as I said, of the priority areas, but also those longer-term, yet-to-be-defined projects within the county. We addressed project and cumulative level impacts, and I analyzed the 3 alternatives, including the no project, the reduced area or priority areas only alternative, and an existing infrastructure alternative. And last here, getting towards the end, the final EIR, which was circulated in November, the public review period ended January 10th. However, a 1-week extension was requested by California Department of Fish and Wildlife, or CDFW, which was granted. So a total of 3 comment letters were submitted on the draft EIR, including the 2 agencies, which were Caltrans and CDFW, and 1 individual. No significant issues were raised in the comments. However, the substantive comments that were provided by CDFW required modifications to refine the mitigation language for biological resources, and those changes have been incorporated into the mitigation in the final EIR and the mitigation monitoring and reporting program. The final EIR document includes all public comments received, SBCAG's written responses to those comments, text revisions applied to the draft EIR as a result of the comments received, and the project's mitigation monitoring and reporting program, which, once adopted, will ensure implementation of the required mitigation measures identified in the final EIR. The mitigation measures contained in the MMRP, as I mentioned, adequately address the input received by CDFW in their comment letter. And with that, I'm here for any questions, but I'll hand it back over to Fred. Thank you.
Okay, we're almost there. Just want to review the recommendations that are before the board today. So we've presented CEQA findings that the board needs to make. And as was read into the record, if you can make those CEQA findings, adopt a resolution that would certify the final programmatic EIR, and then direct staff to file the notice of determination, which will start the clock on reducing the statutory legal challenge from 180 days to 30 days. So we don't want to keep it open-ended for that period. But as you heard, very little public comment, both during the notice of preparation and in the draft. So I think it's a program that people are widely receptive to and supportive of. And so I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Any questions from the board from Mr. Luna? Yes. Director Silva.
I was curious, when you're looking at how you're handling all of this, is it single line connection or is redundancy taken into consideration with all of this? Because I know that like the Valley recently had a brush fire that knocked out our fiber or broadband, and there's one line that kind of did that. So is that considered in all these things?
So thank you for the question through the chair, Director Silva. For last mile installations, those are going directly to end users. But your question is obviously an important one because we look at that in our efforts to work with our state agency partners who are building the middle mile network. And so it's long been our position that we need that redundancy and resiliency in Santa Barbara County. I just had a meeting yesterday with our local kind of representative at the California Department of Technology, giving me an update on how the middle mile process is going. And so their target date is 2026. There is some redundancy, maybe not all of which we were hoping for at the beginning, but we were able to work with them to get key routes in place. Primarily, the redundancy is actually in the North County. A lot of it on the South Coast was not necessarily maintained. It still relies on Highway 101, but that route is going to be going through the Union Pacific Railroad right away up into Lompoc. And then there's another main trunk route coming from Kern County across 166 and then down 101. So those are the two primary efforts. And so hopefully that answered your question.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Very good. Dr. Mosby.
Yeah. How do you address the alternatives of redundancy when there's so much that's happening so fast and the changes are happening? And there's a lot of fiber that's been installed just in my area recently. How do you address that in a document that's kind of somewhat stationary, but things are happening so fast?
I think one of the beauties of doing a programmatic is that apart from the projects that Mr. Crook mentioned, which we've advanced in some level of design, you kind of identify it holistically for what would be the typical projects that could be implemented. But you're right, since we even got the LADA grant, Director Mosby, through the chair, there have been other projects being advanced by internet service providers, and they've also gotten funding for those through state agencies to move forward. One of our priority locations was Los Alamos, for instance, and that had recently gotten 3 applications for state funding. I think one of them has not been awarded, but the potential is there for that to be done either by an internet service provider and maybe perhaps not us. And we just want people to be served. So whoever's in the best position to serve those projects and implement that is, I think, our position as an agency.
So do you direct that as no project needed at that time?
Well, we try to keep aware of all the projects as they're going, through our connections. And so, if there's something that's been documented, if I'm answering your question, documented in the plan that's no longer needed, of course, and is being done by something else, we're making those connections with our network on broadband front.
So you're not duplicating?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the approach.
Very good. Are there any questions from Santa Barbara?
Nope.
All right, very good. And Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
Chair Rouse, we have no request for public comment here or online or in
right.
Santa Barbara.
All right, very good. With that, I will entertain a motion on the items. Okay, Director Silva.
Motion to, I don't know all the words you need to have in the motion, but the intended motion. Yeah, staff recommendation motion to approve.
Okay, for the entire slate of the
Whole slate, everything about it. Love it
shooting
all.
match. I like that kind of brevity.
I'll second that.
Okay, second by Director Patino. May we have the roll call vote, please?
Director Lee.
Aye.
Capps. Hartman. Nelson.
Aye.
Levanino.
Aye.
Parodi.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Mosby.
Aye.
Julian.
Aye.
Patino.
Aye.
Brown.
Aye.
Silva.
Aye.
And Chair Rouse.
Aye.
Motion passes 11-0.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, we'll move on to the Executive Director's report.
Mr. Chairperson, members of the board, thank you very much. Just a reminder, we have our new board member orientation right after this meeting. And we have our board retreat for February 27th in Solvang, so I'm looking forward to that. We are also hosting the Coast Rail Coordinating Council meeting tomorrow at the City of Santa Barbara City Hall, and Mayor Rouse is our representative on that committee, so a good time will be had by all there. And then our executive committee is also meeting on March 12th in Solvang, right immediately following the subregional meeting. So I do have a few announcements here. I want to welcome our newest, one of our two newest members. The first is Tom Vo, our new member of our team, taking on the role of principal transportation planner. He will play a key role in our planning division, leveraging his expertise in planning theories, data analysis, and spatial GIS analytics to help shape the future of transportation opportunities for everyone throughout Santa Barbara County. With more than a decade of professional experience, Tom is a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners and contributes as an appointed board member to the Transportation Research Board's Urban Transportation Data and Information Systems Committee. He holds a bachelor's degree in urban and regional transportation planning, regional planning, and master's in civil engineering from Cal Poly Pomona, along with the certification in architectural drafting. So please join me in welcoming Tom to our team. We also hired Hannah Cohen as our new transportation program coordinator for SBCAG. Hannah holds an environmental studies degree and community-based research certificate from the American University in Washington, D.C. She is excited to join our multimodal team that promotes sustainable transportation in the community and looks forward to engaging with the events like Cyclemania. So welcome our two new team members. And then my last announcement is a sadder one. Almost 18 years ago, Terry Contreras stepped into the role as clerk of the board at SBCAG, and not a single day has been the same since. Known for creativity and tenacity, Contreras has a much-loved chocolate chip cookie recipe that we all try to emulate, and it's displayed on her desk, and she can get cool. Now it's his role. Michael Becker made them for our little get-together last week. Now he has to take the helm on that. But she can get quite competitive to everyone's benefit. She brings treats quite often, but she annually wins our annual holiday bake-off competition. You can say that herding cats is what she specializes in, especially when organizing our advocacy trips to Washington, D.C., or navigating our rambunctious hybrid board meetings. Ultimately, Terry has coordinated the day-to-day administrative details that are needed to get it done to help SBCAG office be as successful as it is. And we appreciate everything that she has done for SBCAG. She has decided to leave SBCAG and begin her new chapter in her retired life. I hope she cherishes her years at SBCAG and smiles when she thinks of the friendships she has formed, especially the Lunch Bunch crew, which she is the life of the party. So please join us in wishing her a happy retirement from SBCAG and her more than 23 years in public service in Santa Barbara County. She's going to be greatly missed in our office because she is a lively personality, if I can just say that. Yeah. And we have a recruitment for her replacement, and those applications are due February 21st. So thank you again, Terry. I know. She doesn't want to drive to Santa Barbara anymore. Her husband is retiring, so she's done with the commute. So again, thank you, Terry, for all of the service of your years at SBCAG. Thank you.
Okay,
And with that, that's my
words, Madam Clerk. Would you like to?
I could probably say a lot. Staff has already said I'm going to come to every SBCAG meeting and do public comment.
For every time I wanted to, I was sitting here, but I couldn't. But no, I'm going to miss everybody. The board, all my coworkers. It's been, since COVID, we've really gotten a lot closer. So it's really been nice. I'm the oldest person leaving the office. I think, yeah, I am. The oldest person leaving the office, but I have the youngest heart of anyone in this office. That much I know. But thank you, everybody.
Right.
45? Exactly.
Very good. Are there any questions on the executive director's report from anybody on the board or anybody in Santa Barbara? If not, we'll move on to Caltrans. Mr. Eads.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I'm Scott Eads, Caltrans District 5 District Director. It's a pleasure to be here in person today. So I have just a kind of a short report, a couple items that I wanted to highlight, and some of which you've already heard at the sub-regional committee. So first, our Caltrans Sustainable Transportation Planning grants. Those applications have come in. I think we received 6 from jurisdictions and applicants within Santa Barbara County. So we'll be kicking those applications up to headquarters. They'll be doing their evaluation, and we expect announcements to come out in the summer. So we'll certainly look forward to those announcements. And then we also have upcoming public meeting to be held on the safety improvements that are being considered at Santa Lucia Canyon. We've also already been doing work at Constellation or south of Constellation. So the meeting is being held on Wednesday, March 12th at 6 p.m. at the Cabrillo High School in Lompoc. So I think the word's out there, but certainly welcome input at that time. And we'll be talking about improvements that were being considered in that area. And thank you, Terry, for all of your great coordination. You will definitely be missed by Caltrans staff as well. So we'll miss you, and thank you. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Eads from Mr. Nelson?
Yes, thank you, Chair Rouse. On the Santa Lucia, at our sub-regional, we had a few conversations about that project. When does that project for the temporary fix, the short-term fix, is that going to come in some type of EIR? Are you guys going to do some environmental work, or when is that project going to come to fruition for comment?
Okay, through the chair on that one, the studies are taking place right now. We're, basically in short, that near-term improvement is closing the left turn channelization. Right. So it's keeping those left turns from occurring, which have been part of the challenge with what we've seen. So we know there's potential repercussions in terms of out of direction travel. So that's being studied now. That's really the studies that are taking place. And of course, as part of this, we're gathering input from the public, making sure the word's out, coordinating with the county staff and others to see, and SBCAG staff on, are there near-term things that we can do? But by and large, Caltrans part will be focused on the Highway 1, but there's a lot of coordination playing out in the background. And at the same time, there's conversations that are playing out. What's the next set of steps? We're talking about a near-term strategy, looking towards a longer-term strategy. So all that's under discussion right now.
For CEQA purposes, is it going to be a project?
That's a great question. I don't know off the top of my head in terms of whether that's an emergency action that we'd be taking, and then if so, there's a follow-up permitting process versus a CEQA action that takes place ahead of time.
Just for feedback, I hope whatever project we have that actually has a time certain, so it's a project that's temporary in actual time, as well as I know it was discussed at the sub-regional about Caltrans maybe funding an evaluation along that corridor, and I think that would also give the area and the locals some comfort that there's progress being made. So I don't know if that discussion has been furthered since the red sub-regionals, but hoping to hear more from Caltrans on whether that's going to be a prioritization of doing a corridor study so that we can really look at what middle and long-term solutions can be.
Yeah, I know there's conversations playing out with SBCAG staff on what is that appropriate next steps and how do we get those things funded. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions from Santa Barbara?
No.
All right, very good. With that, we'll move on to committee meetings. Start out with Calvans. Director Nelson.
Yes, thank you. Two big things that we're currently working on at Calvans. As we're ramping up into our busy season, as many of you may know, that about 85% of our Calvans are dedicated to farm work, and this is a time of year where that's ramping up throughout the state, and some of our vans actually end up going into Yuba, so into Arizona, and some of this is transitory. one thing that we're doing right now is we're actually going to do a comprehensive fee study. One of the great things about Calvans is as far as I know, it may be the only transit district in the nation that's fully cost recovery. Our fare box recovery is 100%. So we make it all on passenger fares. But we're going to look at those numbers because we do run pretty thin. We don't have a lot in reserves, and it does limit our ability to invest in capital so that we have more vans in the future. So we're taking a deep dive into that. We know we're a good value because we have a long waiting list of those jurisdictions and companies and users that want Calvans, but we don't have the inventory to meet that need. So we really want to be able to get our arms wrapped around that. Second thing we're also working on is many of you know that we had a $15 million allocation in the Prop 4 climate bond towards Calvans. We're hearing that it's probably not going to be in the next couple of budget cycles, but we're trying to look forward and seeing and making sure that when those dollars come to Calvans that we're using them appropriately. So we're sending out a RFP for maybe a business plan, so we make sure that we have those dollars deployed in a way that's accountable to the taxpayers for that investment. So those are two big things that were going on right now. And so if anybody ever has a question about Calvans, I'm currently the vice chair and very active in the ongoing day-to-day maintenance of that organization. So hit me up.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the LoSAN Board, Director Perotti.
Yes, yes, thank you, Chair. Well, my first meeting was on the 18th, that was Tuesday, and we started off with the election of the new chair and vice chairs. Chair is Fred Young, vice chair Fred Strong, and Dana Reed. Then they did a resolution to the outgoing board of directors that have left, and Doss Williams was virtually on the phone, and we presented him with a resolution, and I said a few words thanking him for his time on SBCAG and also LoSAN. The board's primary, it was a very full board. The board's primary focus was on the approval of looking at the 2025 goals, emphasizing coastal resiliency and regional connectivity, and the protecting rail service from the effects of climate and streamlining permitting processes. So that was on the goals. Also, we looked at the annual business plan for fiscal years 2025 through 2027. It was presented, and the highlight for legislative advocacy and budget planning. So I also expressed to my colleagues on LoSAN that I was very proud to be acknowledged and appointed by the SBCAG board, and I look forward to meeting them in person, inviting them up to Goleta in Santa Barbara County. And then I also made a brief report on our Goleta train station. And I enjoyed it. It was interesting, but I did enjoy the meeting. Thank you.
All right, very good. With that, we'll go to 1-minute reports. Anybody have a 1-minute report? No minutes in North County. How about in Santa Barbara? Okay, with that, our next meeting will be on March 20th. We have CRCC coming up tomorrow, and of course the retreat on the 27th. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.